Matthew? Matthew?
Hey there, Adrenalheads. I'm Jerry.
And I'm Mark.
And on today's show, we are covering from 1978, The Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Yes.
Yes. So the synopsis of this particular episode, this particular movie, when strange seeds drift to the Earth from space, mysterious pods begin to grow and invade San Francisco, replicating the city's residents one body at a time.
Yeah.
Very short and sweet, which is pretty cool and very much accurate.
Yeah, very accurate. All right, so let's go to starring roles in the film. First, we have Donald Sutherland as Matthew Bennell. So, and counting what he has upcoming, he will have 200 credits in IMDb. Now, that's one of the highest I've heard, and that's kind of like a bonkers amount.
Yeah.
And going back to his first credit, he's been acting for about 60 years. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and some of his better known roles are Kelly's Heroes, which I really liked, MASH, Clute, Animal House, which I haven't seen in a long time.
Yep.
Ordinary People is good. Eye of the Needle is excellent. He had an excellent cameo in Backdraft. Do you remember that one? He was the pyromaniac.
Yep.
Buffy the Vampire Slayer, The Puppet Masters, which, as a little fun fact, was shot mostly here in the Valley in California.
Oh, really?
Yeah. As you know, the main silver building that they're flying in the helicopter over is our own Fresno City Hall.
Well, the original 1956 version of The Invasion of the Body Snatchers was filmed in Southern California as well.
Yeah.
That we do get a cameo in the movie.
Yes, we
By
do.
the way, ladies and gentlemen, so we'll get to that when we talk about that.
Yeah.
But let's continue.
Yeah, and then he's got a role in Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, which is incidentally also really good. The Italian Job remake, Mr. Harrigan's Phone, which I have not seen yet, but I have it on my list. Ad Astra, The Hunger Games, and the ever great Moonfall. Let's just Daphne and Paik about that one.
Yeah, it was such a great movie. I don't know why they destroyed it the way they did on their podcast.
Yeah, I don't know.
Honestly, it was fun to listen to their podcast on Moonfall than watching the movie. And there was only one good character in it. We all know who that character is. He was from Game of Thrones, the actor. And that's the only benefit to the whole movie, in my opinion.
Yeah, and for TV, he's done several TV shows, Crossing Lines, The Avengers, The Uprising, that was a TV movie, a show called Commander-in-Chief, and The Undoing, which was recently done, and that was with Nicole Kidman.
Yes, and when Jerry speaks of The Avengers, he's not talking about the Avengers from the MCU, he's talking about the 60s. Version of the Avengers too, which was a TV series.
Yes, with Patrick McNee and Diana Rigg, if I remember right.
Yes.
My memory still works. Thank you.
Well, next up would be Brooke Adams as Elizabeth Driscoll. Beautiful woman too. Her movie credits include The Dead Zone, which I forgot, which was an incredible movie. Shockwaves. And The Unborn, which was in 1991, I believe, right?
Something like that, yeah.
Okay.
And have you seen Shockwaves?
Shockwaves was that the sequel to the Rocky Horror Picture Show?
No.
Okay, so I'm thinking of different Shockwaves completely.
Different one, yeah. Yeah, this one was it was about a Nazi scientist trying to create zombies, or like trying to preserve soldiers through zombification.
Ah, okay, I remember now.
It's a kind of like a one-off B type movie. So.
Yeah. Well, honestly, B movies. TV credits include Monk, Wings, which I have to really ask Tim Daly about that. 30-something, Moonlighting, Sometimes They Come Back, Law and Order SVU. And a lot of people will get her confused too with I'm forgetting the actress's name now, but she was in Raiders of the Lost Ark.
Oh, Karen Allen.
Karen Allen.
Yeah.
And I think she would have been perfect.
She would have been good at that role too, yeah.
Yeah, for that role.
Okay, next up we have Jeff Goldblum as Jack Belichick. Excellent actor.
Yes.
We know him from mostly Jurassic Park. his probably his best known role.
Yeah.
He was in The Fly, which was an excellent remake.
Great Cronenberg remake.
Yeah,
yep.
Love Cronenberg. Grand Budapest Hotel, which is also good. I think I only saw it one time. So.
Same here.
Mm-hmm. The Right Stuff is like a supporting player.
Mm-hmm.
Powder, and one of his funnier roles, Independence Day.
Oh, I love Independence Day. So does Ben. So
yes, he does. And TV shows include Law and Order: Criminal Intent. He was really good in that. 10 Speed and Brown Shoe from the 70s.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, good Lord. That was that was kind of an show for me. Guest spots on various shows throughout the 70s include Columbo, Starsky and Hutch, and Laverne and Shirley. And incidentally, the first time I remember seeing Jeff Goldblum, and I didn't see it until I rewatched the movie years after this one came out, but he was one of the criminals in the first Death Wish movie with Charles Bronson.
I remember him more from Buckaroo Banzai.
Oh, you do? Okay. Oh, I did not put Buckaroo Banzai on here.
No, you didn't.
He was in that?
Yeah, he was.
Oh, damn. Okay. Oh, all right.
All right. To move forward, we have Veronica Cartwright as Nancy Belichick. And I've gotten to meet Nancy a bunch of times. She's a lovely woman to talk to, especially at conventions.
You mean Veronica?
Movies? Yeah, Veronica. Not Nancy.
Not Nancy. Okay. Nancy would be a little bit neurotic. So.
Yeah, exactly. No, Veronica Cartwright. I met her a bunch of times.
I would love to.
Yeah. Movies include The Birds, the original Birds from Hitchcock, Flight of the Navigator, Wisdom, Witches of Eastwick. Yeah, she played a little bit of a crazy loon in that particular movie, too. Alien, which probably her most well-known role. And she does do a scream in this particular movie that is very reminiscent of her character in that as Carter, I think. Is it Carter? No, it's not Carter. I'm getting the wrong character. Lambert. There you go. The Invasion, another Body Snatchers remake, too, that Jerry points out eloquently. And TV credits include The Twilight Zone, Alfred Hitchcock Presents, Daniel Boone, Dr. Kildare, Family Affair, LA Law, The Lottery, which was a TV movie, and ER. She also comes from the Cartwright family, which her sister was actually Nancy Cartwright, which I kind of got mixed up. But she actually played in Lost in Space in the 60s. Mm-hmm. And that's where the family name comes into play.
Yeah. Okay, and next up we have one of my favorites, Leonard Nimoy as Dr. Kibner.
Yep.
He's done a lot of movies. I said most famously, he's done 8 Star Trek movies, and he's done the original 6 and then 2 of the newer ones. Did voices in a couple Transformers movies, including the 80s movie, which was excellent. And did voiceover work in TV shows like The Simpsons, Big Bang Theory, and he played a animated head in Futurama, which a lot of those were just all the like modern, like I said, the contemporary people now would be heads in glass jars.
Yes.
Which I really thought was funny. Okay, and TV. Well, let's see. What is he known for in TV, Mark? What do you think?
I don't know. In
Spark?
Search of? Yeah, Spock.
Yeah, Mr. Spock. Yes, that's his most famous role, of course. Also in Fringe, Brave New World TV show, which I remember really liking. He was a regular on Mission Impossible, which I totally forgotten about until I looked it up because I never really kept up with that show. It was a little bit before my time. Did some episodes of Gunsmoke, Perry Mason, an episode of The Twilight Zone, Bonanza, and was host of In Search of, which is one of my favorites.
Yeah, same here. We were talking about that before we actually started recording and reminiscing.
Yeah.
In Search of was very much, they need to bring shows back like that. It's kind of like the Ripley's Believe It or Not of its time. And it's stuff that kept us glued to the TV whenever that show came on in the late 70s, early 80s.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and he also did several movies and TV shows doing as a director.
Mm-hmm.
And he also directed 2 of the original 6 Star Trek movies.
Yes, he did.
Yeah, wish he would have done a 3rd one, so 5 wouldn't have been so bad. But
all right. Well, next up would be Art Hindle as Jeffrey, and he has 185 credits. Movies that you may recognize him from would be Black Christmas, The Brood, The Octagon, a lot of other TV and other movies that have never heard of. I guess something that Jerry was looking through and going, wow, I've never even heard of any of these. But for the most part, Black Christmas, The Brood, The Octagon, and that's about it. TV, he did Alfred Hitchcock Presents in the 80s, Revival, Hunter, which I remember, Murder, She Wrote, Airwolf, a classic 80s TV show, MacGyver, which I always loved as a kid too in the 80s, and Matlock.
Yeah, and that'll do it for those. And our general thoughts of the movie. So, Mark, what did you think?
General thoughts, well, yeah, this is a movie I always look at fondly since it scared the crap out of me as a kid because it was always replayed on TV. I never saw it in the theater. I always saw it on whether it be the Sunday afternoon movie, and shortly after it came out in the theaters in the 70s, it came out onto TV and replayed on as like the Sunday morning or a Sunday afternoon show or movie show. And it scared the bejesus out of me at times because it's one of those weird movies. It was a remake of the 1956 film because my father would always point that in my head saying, oh, this is not the original. The original was really good. But I thought it was always done very well and I think it still holds up from what I could see, regardless of it being dated for its time. Mm-hmm. You have that essence of 70s in it. But before we started podcasting or even thinking about this, I haven't seen it in years. So until Jerry brought it up recently, I was like, oh, I got to go back to the well and go watch it again. I haven't seen it in some time, probably a good 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, me too.
And I thought, it still holds up, and as I was watching it the first time, I watched this a couple of times. It gave me those feelings that we get from other movies that came after it that were very similar, like Body Snatchers in 1993, Invasion of the Pod People in 2007, Invasion in 2007 with Nicole Kidman, Jeremy Northam, and Daniel Craig, as well as The Puppet Masters in 1994, which we do get Donald Sutherland, Julie Warner, and Andrew Robinson in. And plus, of all things, The Faculty from 1998, which I think was kind of I think it was influenced by it, but adding in a little bit more 90s-esque to it and giving you that more feeling, but also giving you youthful feeling too, because it was in high school. Yeah. I just love the fact that we get this kind of suspenseful, thrilling, and conspiracy style movie within this particular film, and the fact that we got Donald Sutherland, Leonard Nimoy, Jeff Goldblum, Brooke Adams, and Veronica Cartwright in this film. It was amazing. It was a great cast for its time, for the story during that time, and I think it represented the actual book very well because, honestly, this is the second iteration of Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So, but it's no Invasion of the Empire of the Apes, though. That just came out in 2021, but yeah, that's just me.
I haven't seen that one yet.
Well, there's ape cannibalism in that, so keep in mind, everybody. So if you're not into apes eating each other, don't watch it.
Yeah.
Just a little joke.
Okay. For me, I have a love for 70s movies. Like, we have Logan's Run, Omega Man, the other stuff we've covered for the 70s. Yeah. And I like it because a lot of it is mental. You don't see it, you don't see a lot of flagrant, a lot of flagrant violence. You see a little bit. There's some creepy imagery, and it's more of like these beings doing a silent takeover of the town. So, and one of the things I really liked about it is that, I have to mention the music, and I think we'll cover the music later, but there's some elements of the music that were meshed well with the sound effects. And so sometimes it was difficult to tell what was a sound effect and what was music.
or the silent cues that we do get visually too within the film, which you don't get right away if you're a first-time viewer. You don't get these until you watch the movie several times, and there's so many cool added ones in it. So this is a movie that you just don't go watch once and be like, oh, and then you come off with a one-off attitude. You have to watch it a couple of times because it's a mind bender.
Yeah, and one of the things I also liked about it is there's a lot of like handheld close-in work because the spots that they chose to shoot the film in were actual homes, and the director had to do a lot of handheld work, like which is what you see in the film. So there's a little bit of kind of a little sense of bewilderment in that because you feel like a little bit off. There's just
it's a lot of POV at that point too, and on top of that, you feel like a perv because you're right in somebody's like right there,
Yeah, exactly. And then a lot of what I saw that they did was they replicated a lot of the shadows and a lot of that were used in the original film from '56. They did some of that stuff, like when you have a light at the end of a street and it shows like shadows on the wall, stuff like that.
Okay. Yeah, these are things that you have to go back and look for, everybody.
Yeah.
I didn't catch those, but I caught all the nuanced stuff that you see, like garbage trucks closing in, and you see plants or look like pollen or whatever being crushed. Or you see people walking in a weird format and, cadence on the street as certain events arise. It's really cool to watch it, or even in the very beginning of the opening scene, when we see the pollen or things that come to Earth and how it interacts and it starts to move, kind of like the environmental like videos we got when we were in third grade that you had to sit there and they showed you the Disney stuff where the pollen and the flowers and how they blossom and everything. It to me, that showed the element of what was going on within the aliens and how in their vegetative state coming and imposing onto the Earth and taking over.
Yes.
But those little things that we get, but there are still more to come.
And from here, we'll go on to our favorite scenes in the movie. So, Mark, you want to start us off?
Well, obviously, I already started it. The intro scene.
Yeah.
I thought it was pretty cool, laying out the cells and or the pods coming to the Earth. And then we get the plants on the Earth and them thriving within said Earth. It's kind of nuanced. It's kind of like I stated, like a Walt Disney ecological discovery that you sat through in third grade. Jeffrey being one of the first few that were infecting, and Elizabeth being suspicious about him. I thought that was pretty cool. Because you could see how off he is in the way he's interacting and reacting to her in comparison to the very first time they're actually having an interaction. Suddenly after that, it was completely different.
Yeah, he's watching a basketball game and he's going crazy over certain things. And the next morning he's like flat.
Yeah. Flatlined like a dead cadaver, and he has no emotion, no nothing, doesn't have any social rapport at all, knowing how to talk to people. Right there, something's wrong. But there are little nuances in there that I saw, like, there's this one where it's a little view we get of a guy peering outside the door, looking at Elizabeth as she's walking by. It's like one of those, like, deadpanned right there, but it's one shot and you have to look for it. And I saw it at the corner of my eye when I did a second rewatch, going, that was creepy as all hell.
Yes. and that's what I like about it, because it doesn't have to be, graphic to be creepy.
Yeah.
All right. So my first one here is when we have Elizabeth and Matthew driving, and they're talking about what's going on and what she's observing among people. Like they're, almost like communicating with each other, and kind of, it's like silent whispers. And what happens here is that they almost hit a guy when Matthew's driving, he almost hits a guy, and we find out that this guy's screaming, "They're next!" They're here, and which happens to be one of our cameos of Kevin McCarthy, who was the star of the remake. I mean, the star of the original, not the remake. The original,
yes, which literally takes place. Literally, if you think about it, it's exactly what he was saying at the very end of that particular movie. which was awesome.
Yes.
To me, it's one of those. It's like you got it, you nailed it.
Yes, and it's a great nod to it. And then he runs off down the street. You see him getting chased by a number of other people, and then you hear a car accident happen. You hear the thump, and they find out that he's been hit by a car and killed.
Yeah, he did.
He did.
Next up for me would be the consistent talk about people saying that people aren't who they are.
Mm-hmm.
And that was during the book signing for Kibner's book at the bookstore. And Elizabeth, you could see how she's a little bit leery looking around. The looks and talks amongst people within the bookstore, and the looks were very giving of being suspicious about things that were talked about. And it makes you think, okay, some of these people are turned. Maybe they're not turned. Maybe they are. We don't know. Maybe it's just Elizabeth's paranoia, or maybe it's actually what we're thinking as viewers going, wait, this is really happening.
Something's going on. So and we don't know exactly what just yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we have the other lady that's Kibner's talking to. Who's like, my husband is not my husband. And he kind of does like a mini therapy session at that point.
Yes, but we also get that in the cleaners
as well.
Yeah.
Okay. My next one is we have a montage of Elizabeth following Jeffrey around because she says, kind of suspicious of him. So she decides to follow him around during the day and notices him that he's like carrying something, puts it in the back of a garbage truck. And the garbage trucks with this are kind of ubiquitous throughout a portion of the movie, is that you see him, what looks like to me like gray insulation.
Yeah, it looks like somebody's like, oh, they were cleaning out their attic and they had all this bad insulation. It's all gray and white. Let's crush it and get rid of it. And that's what I was alluding to earlier.
Yeah, and meeting with other people, talking in whispers, stuff like that, like they know each other.
Next up for me would probably be Belichick in the mud bath. Apparently, the Belichicks own a mud bath or a massage parlor. So, and him being possibly snatched at that time, I think it was the first attempt. If you think about it, the clues were there when Nancy and he found the body with the webbing on it. And it was just a body, and they wound up getting Matthew there, and Kibner shows up, and they look at it, and Kibner's playing it off like, oh, this is wrong, blah, 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 it's another person. But mind you, Belichick himself had a bloody nose where he clotted it up. And there was a point where he was by the body, but the white stuff, I say the cottony stuff, goes towards his arm, tries to...
Yeah, the tendrils.
Tendrils.
Yeah, the tendrils.
Yeah. This isn't Day of the Triffids, but yeah, they will go after you. And it's like literally trying to grasp hold of the flesh to continue more of like copying that person. But the body itself its nose starts to bleed.
Yes.
Just like his in the same nostril.
And that's just that little bit is creepy too. So.
Yes. So I thought it was pretty chilling. I think it was a pretty great scene nonetheless too. And it was something to add to that they could move on to is foreshadowing, because we go back to that place later on.
My next one is the audio/video montage of Matthew making all his calls to various officials, like, all feds, other state officials, trying to get somebody to freaking listen. And there's just not a whole lot of movement on it. Because he's calling Washington, he's calling everybody he can get a hold of, and to no avail. Yeah.
He's trying anything and anything to get somebody to listen to them. Very much similar to the original in the 50s, but in this case, it was more or less centered around the situation. They were looking for just to get that out there and stress that nobody's paying attention. But we do get that later on too, when he's calling again and again. This what you're talking about earlier on in the movie, though.
Well, yeah, that plus, there's one where he's said, I got to start making calls. This is, there's other spots where he's, like trying to get the police over there too. Like when Elizabeth's first body disappears.
Yeah.
Because she got, I think it took 3 times for her to get copied.
Yeah. It's like, 3 times to get copied. Belichick twice. And if you think about that, Matthew himself, him twice.
Him twice, yeah.
I guess these aliens really can't get it right. The first,
you gotta be. It's like you gotta be asleep for what? I don't know, a couple hours maybe.
Yeah, I guess so. But yeah, it's like these aliens are really not crafty at what they have to do.
Well, the pod's got to be faster then. So.
Yeah.
All right, we'll go ahead with your next one.
Next one. Well, you already stated Benel's calling to everyone to get the information out there. But this is, with mine, it was more of the second version of him calling out. You could see him going from payphone to payphone, and he's calling every means, and they're like, no. And they're trying to shut him down and saying to him that it's all just paranoia that he has. He has to seek out proper treatment and blah, blah, blah. Then the dry cleaner retracting his thoughts about his wife when he goes to see him and saying no, because originally his wife was not being who she was. And now it's like, my wife is fine. And so it's as if the world has changed and turned on him, and the few that are there that remain are just so small an amount.
Yeah. Ever dwindling set of allies.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. My next one is the scene where Matthew and the others are getting copied because, he fell asleep, and this is where he sees the bodies of, himself, Elizabeth, and Jack being copied. And what's her name? Oh, shoot. I forgot her name already. Nancy wakes him up. And said, and tries to wake the others people's up, saying, they get you when you sleep. And this is when they find out how it's happening. And this whole thing about, like the pod, that great effect of the pod, like you see it kind of like blowing up and spitting out like, that Matthew's head, and just in this like a automaton of tendrils and flesh. So,
automaton of tendrils and flesh.
Well, that's kind of what it looked like. It didn't really have any it was just kind of a blank form.
Yeah.
And then started to look more and more like, who it was copying.
Yeah, definitely. It's so when we see them, they are kind of blank and they're blanketed with that white cottony substance to themselves. There's no visual distinction of who they are. It's hard to tell. But we do get that later on at one of my favorite scenes when they all gather back at Benel's house. And that's when everybody falls asleep. And Elizabeth is there, Benel's there, Belichick, Nancy Belichick is there. What's his name? Kibner? Kibner. There you go. He shows up too, but he's trying to like reinforcing the idea, get some sleep. So you know right away. Yeah. It's like,
you don't get it right away. So.
Yeah. So but the fact that, he goes out there, he locks the back gate, he sits back there, and then Matthew starts to get copied at that point. And it gets to a point where we start to actually do see how these things are formed, as it's like a big, huge pod, and with a flower on it, the flower spits off, and then you see a head, the body kind of slithers out. And then he winds up killing himself at that point, but he also sees the other bodies.
Yeah, and smashes those too.
Yeah, he's literally killing people. Yeah. And then he winds up waking everybody up and getting them out. And then there's a long dash for them to run to get away. But the whole town is against him at this point, because everybody literally at this point is a pod person.
Or a great majority. Or a great majority of people.
Yeah, and then people are being told and forced to get into single file and by the authorities, and people are handed pods if you see that at certain points. And then of course you get that weird goofy dog thing, but we do know that Matthew passes Harry, the homeless man, who was being cloned or being turned into a pod person at that point with his dog nearby. So apparently there is an amalgam. Now, mind you, everybody, listeners, I'm looking at a picture of Jerry online now with a video, and it's so funny to look at because he's got the dog/person by him on his wallpaper, and it's hilarious and creepy all at once with the tongue flicking up its mouth and face. But it's like Matthew trying to get away, and they try to go to the airport, and there's these issues, and the taxi driver like grilling them, like, "Oh, where are you going? What flight? Oh, we're going to United. It's like, oh, you're leaving? No, we're picking somebody up." And then it got to that point where, with the barricade and everything, they had to leave, and they wound up leaving and getting away. But it comes to a point where they have to shack up somewhere. They have to get away. And him and Elizabeth wind up staying the night, but Elizabeth succumbs to being copied. And the worst thing that I've ever saw in this particular movie, I'm not saying it's worse in the bad effects, but in the sense of feeling bad for a character, her body just crumbles within his hands like a dying flower. If I could, like a dead flower, as it were, when it's dried out. And to me, that is like, wow, that was some good effects for its time.
Yeah, that's what I call the husk. It's just like all the stuff's been taken out. All you have left is a husk.
Yeah.
And that was my next one and I call that, that's what I call the third time's a charm effect. Is because she was, after two failed attempts, she gets finally copied after she finally falls asleep. And this is when they're outside kind of like the aliens are processing the pods, so they can start shipping them out. As you see, they're shipping them out everywhere. They specify a whole bunch of towns, everything. So
yeah, and this is when you realize in the film that this is taking over en masse. So
it's spreading fast,
and you have to think not just this town, but worldwide. It can't be just in one area,
Yeah. And they're putting them on shipping container, on boats to be shipped overseas.
Yes,
like that.
Meaning that it only hit the Western U.S. and eventually it'll lead to the Eastern version of U.S. But they have to ship it over to the other countries at this point to, basically have the Earth takeover that they need to.
Yeah. Well, think of it like, do you remember the first remake of the Planet of the Apes where they showed like the progression, like they showed the flight of the pilot who was infected?
Correct.
Gets infected, and then they show the other glowing lines going to other cities.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I pictured. In that. So.
If they had more effects back then, a little bit more writing cred to their ability back then, they could have made it work. But I don't think they would have been able to make it look as good. If they actually redo this movie in a sense very similar to this, not the original, because the original was self-contained because that was filmed in Southern California, and the way we got that original 1956 version, it seemed very isolated. Whereas with this, it seemed like they wanted to go global. And then with the remakes that came out, they didn't really do a very well job of writing the story of how it could possibly move on. I'm sure eventually, because once a decade, they always come up with a remake because Hollywood can't be original at times, so they'll probably remake this again.
Yeah, and one thing I did want to mention too is that one special note I have to say, there's several clues in the progression of the film where you see like when Elizabeth's following Jeffrey around. You see one guy, and she's just like walking to work, one morning she's walking to work, and you see one guy running for what's seeming like running for his life in this case, and you don't know why he's running.
Yes. Yeah.
And there's several other things dotted throughout the show.
Yeah, you have to really keep your eyes peeled for these little segments. Yeah. Just like I said with the garbage trucks, just like I said with the peering of, or even her being followed. There was a lot of times, too, with her being followed and then the looks of people when they're in public. Because there's certain scenes where they're amongst other people, but they're kind of like giving that edge look or leery or quick gaze straight to them and listening in on what's going on. So, yeah, it's kind of nuanced. It's something back then, I think in the 70s, if you weren't a film buff, you weren't going to catch. And that's probably the reason why the movie didn't do so well in the theaters back in the day. Probably because it's one of those niche kind of movies. And nowadays, these niche kind of movies is pretty much how Hollywood is written with a lot of movies that you and I both love.
Yeah. You see, and with that part is like, you notice it more on the second and third time you watch it. Is like, if you know to watch out for it, like if you were told that and you know to watch out for it, then you can find these clues. And there's probably far more that I didn't notice, again, on this watch.
There's a ton out there, and that has to do with the filmmaker too. And like I said, it's for that time. It was something that was early Hollywood that they kind of flavored into what we get nowadays. And it's something that we don't take for granted for certain movies or shows or series that we like. And this is a one-off. So I'm not saying, I'm not giving this a bad review, everybody. This is something that's really cool and unique.
Yeah. And I have to mention the dog with the banjo player's head. I mean, that was one of those things that, I didn't watch it till I was probably 15. So that was probably, just like 6 or 7 years after the movie came out. And because the movie came out when I was 7. So I wasn't able to watch it, in the theater.
Yeah.
I wouldn't have grasped everything at the age of 7. But, by the time I was in, I watched this, I think, when I was a sophomore in high school, sophomore, junior. And I remember my mother and my aunt just like seeing the dog head, the dog with the human head, and doing the lick and the little squeal. It's just like, it was one of those things that just made you jump and cringe. And it's like, and I'm like, cool.
I think I thought the same thing as a kid because I saw it on a black and white TV in my parents' old business in the back by the freezer area. It was, to me, I look at that and I'm like, all right, that's so cheesy. It's cool. Honestly, it does scare the bejesus out of you overall. It's like, after watching the movie, I think it was like 10 years old in 1982 at the time. And I thought, okay, everybody's a replicant. Everybody's a vegetable or flower.
Yeah.
But yeah, that to me, I thought it was pretty cool. I do enjoy that. They've done other movies like that. Like other movies have made a nod to that. I think Nightmare on Elm Street has done that with Freddy, with something, his face on a dog's body. If you remember that in one of the movies.
I don't. Okay.
Yeah. There's.
I probably haven't watched all of them.
You got to look at the references. I'm pretty sure you'll find at least 2 or 3 movies that will have that. Yeah. Which when I saw that right away, I was like, Invasion of the Body Snatchers. So they were like, somebody was like, I got to throw that in there. Well, it's not.
Yeah. Well,
it's not an original idea.
Yeah, and I know the whole "don't fall asleep" thing is definitely Freddy.
Oh yeah, Nightmare on Elm Street. Yeah, definitely.
Because one thing humans cannot go without is sleep.
That is true. We have to have that downtime.
All right, so let's. Are we done with our scenes and stuff?
Well, the last one I would like to talk about is that ending scene that we get with Nancy and Matthew in the courtyard in the park, and how she thinks he got away. And she reaches out, and all we get is that ungodly pointing and squealing and screeching, and her screaming for her life.
Yes.
Which you would think would be, sequel?
Yeah, and what I found out, years later, but that is the yard in front of San Francisco City Hall.
Ah, okay.
Yeah, and I double checked that. I was like, yeah. That's the exact same spot. So, and I just checked that a couple days ago.
All right, cool.
All right, so let's move on to interesting facts and unknown facts about the movie. So, Mark, you want to start?
Sure. First one, well, based on the book Body Snatchers by Jack Finney, but the book has different ending where the aliens underestimated the humans' determination for survival. Interesting.
And they're resoundingly beaten. And this is more in line with the 2007 version of Invasion. So
cool.
Yeah. Next one is in the opening scene of the movie with the children at the park. The priest on the swing is played by Robert Duvall in a cameo.
Wow. I saw him in the credits and I was like, where is he? And I have to go look again.
Yeah. And reading more up on it, he was in San Francisco at the time and knew the director Kaufman, and he did that scene for free. And the other things I've read and seen about the movie is that he was like one of the first ones that was replicated, or so, or thought to be the first ones, one of the first ones.
Ah, that's cool.
Yeah, because he had that kind of blank, unemotional stare.
Oh, yeah. If you saw him on the swing, yeah, definitely. Because the way he was looking. He was like there swinging away. Look.
Yes.
All right. Next up, all the special effects were created live for the camera. The scene at the beginning where the pods travel through space from their dead homeworld to San Francisco was one of the simplest. Kaufman recalled, I found some vicious material in an art store. I think we paid $12 for a big vat of it, and then we dropped it into solutions and reversed the film, which is pretty cool because honestly, the most simplistic effect can make the biggest difference. And it's just a visual thing because we're talking pollen. All you needed was a little grams of flakes or whatever with some oil compound and just drop it in there and it'll look right.
Yeah, and for this one, I remember the like the clear stuff on like big leaves that you saw that was like expanding and growing into the pods. That was a really neat effect for the time.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, and next one we have is sound editor Ben Burt, who had helped create many of the signature sounds for Star Wars the year before, also added to the film's ambiance. Natural sounds that mixed with the city's more industrial noises gave way to the latter as the film's progressing. Among them are the grinding noises of the garbage trucks, and that's a common urban sound, and that slowly becomes more horrific as you realize what that means. So that's, they're putting the husks in there and taking them away to be dumped. So, and Bert also designed the shriek that when the pod people see a human, and that was made from a few elements, including the squeal of a pig. God, I can't speak today. But just if you think about it, it's like, yeah, if you hear squealing pigs, you can hear that in there.
Yeah, that is true. And to talk about the whole garbage dump thing, it kind of makes me reflect on a movie that we already covered that had garbage trucks, Soylent Green.
Yeah.
Think about it. Soylent Green or us, and they were putting people in there. They were crushing them, making them food.
Yeah. I think they just put them in there and then drop the bodies and then process, turn them into the solution and then turn them into the wafers.
Mushed them. Yeah.
Yeah. Like you gotta, it's like, we'd make something out of you one of these days.
Exactly. You're well worth your means. All right. Next up, cinematographer Michael Chapman worked with Kaufman to try to capture the film noir feel of the original in color. Reviewing some classics of that genre before production, some of the elements they borrowed were shots with light giving away to shadow and shooting from evocative angles. They used certain color tinges to indicate that some characters were now pod people. When they're running along Embarcadero and the huge shadows appear first, those are sort of classic film noir images, the director said. Very much like what Jerry was talking about earlier.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because that I really liked because that reminds me of a film called Rebecca. I don't know if you've ever seen that one.
I know the name.
It's a one about where they have to. Oh no, sorry, not Rebecca, but The Third Man. So.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Sorry, I got my noir films mixed up. So.
I was gonna say.
Okay. Next one is the dog with the banjo player's face, included a mechanism whereby the creature appeared to lick itself. So I've heard varying versions of this, and the other is I've heard that it was a latex appliance that was put on the dog's face because it was kind of like a boxer, so it had a flatter face. So what they did is that they put some
peanut butter or something on it.
Some peanut butter or something that the dog would lick itself. So when they had the lick that you see on my screen, is that, it's just included the little squeal sound of it. It's just like, that was just, I still love that. To this day, it just creeps me out and I love it. All right. Let's go on to the next one.
Next one. Well, the film features a number of cameo appearances. Kevin McCarthy, who played Dr. Miles Bennell in the original Invasion of the Body Snatchers, makes a brief appearance as an old man frantically screaming, "They're coming!" to passing cars on the street. Though not playing the same character, Kaufman meant McCarthy's cameo as a nod to the original movie, as if he had been metaphorically running around the country since the original film, shouting out his warnings, which I got. That was my whole feeling from day one when I saw that, because like I said, my parents grew up. My parents, like, they were seeing films in the 50s, late 40s, early 50s, and my mom would talk about, Invasion of the Body Snatchers, the original. So, and actually, I got to see where they originally filmed that location of the big scene of the original 1956. My sister was engaged to somebody, and his family had a house, and it oversaw where the big event was for Invasion of the Body Snatchers. And her, at that time, future in-laws pointed out, hey, look, see that? That's movie history right there. And I'm like, are you kidding me? And then I took a picture of it with my camera at the time, mind you, at 35 millimeter. And then I looked it up. Yeah, it was. It was the same area and location. Wild.
Yeah. And I like seeing stuff like that.
Same here.
Yeah. And I remember being in, as I said, this is just a one-off aside, is that I remember being in Hollywood years ago on a college trip and walking with a friend walking with a few people down the street, and I recognized the building from the very end of Pretty Woman.
Huh.
When he goes up the fire escape, and I was like, hey, that's from Pretty Woman, because it was like the year after it came. We were there like the year after I watched it.
Yeah. That's pretty
cool.
Was pretty
cool. And it's cheaper to film in your backyard.
That is true. Well, that's what California is at most part.
Yes. Alrighty, so go on here. The original film's director Don Siegel appears as the taxi driver who alerts the police to Matthew and Elizabeth's attempt to flee the city. That was the original director, which I did not know, and I was like, that is freaking cool.
That is amazing. Because it's a pretty decent long scene too.
Yeah.
And that's the one I was telling you where he was asking them questions.
Yeah, grilling them where
they were going. And wow, awesome. Next up, Kaufman appears in dual roles, both as man wearing hat who bothers Sutherland's character in a phone booth, that I remember, and the voice of one of the officials Sutherland's character speaks to on the phone. That's pretty cool.
Next one is McCarthy and Siegel played a role in shaping the film's twist ending. Before filming, Kaufman had sought out Siegel for advice, and while the two were talking in the latter's office, McCarthy happened to come in. The topic eventually came around to the film's ending, which they regarded as pat, and after coming up with the ending he used, he kept it as a secret from everyone involved in the filming except screenwriter W.D. Richter and producer Robert Solow. Sutherland was the only one informed of the scene the night before shooting, and Kaufman is not sure Cartwright knew until Sutherland did his turn and shriek. And the studio executives learned only of it when a cut was screened for them at George Lucas's house.
Wow.
And from what I've heard, they loved it.
That is amazing, because think about her, Cartwright, and the way she reacts. That was probably real. Just like
it seemed authentic.
Yeah, it seemed authentic. Yeah, just like an Alien, when they kind of didn't tell them about the alien bursting throughout his chest, John Hurt's chest, and they got their real reactions, and she shrieked and screamed, and they have that originally on film. So she, oh man, that's something to actually ask Veronica Cartwright if you have to see her in at a convention. Trust me, she still goes to those.
That would be a great one to ask her. It's like, did you know of the final, did you know the final ending of that movie before it was shot? So.
She's always asked about Alien more than anything, but that's something to ask her. That's pretty cool.
Yeah. All right. Go ahead.
Invasion of the Body Snatchers 1978 has been named among the greatest film remakes ever made by several publications, including Rolling Stone.
Mm-hmm. And I consider it one of the greatest ones too, because it's one of my favorite films, at least in like science fiction horror goes.
Yeah, it looks right up there with Carpenter's The Thing that you and I covered. To me, it's one of those passionate remakes that really did the job.
And with that, are we done with our facts here?
Sure.
Okay. So let's move on to quotes. So Mark, you want to take the first quote?
This one comes from Elizabeth, and this is her to Kibner going, Jeffrey is not Jeffrey. Literally.
And
go ahead. I could do mine after yours.
Okay. One of the ones that, and this is like, the subtle clues throughout the movie that before we find out exactly what's going on. You see the man in the dry cleaner saying, "That's not my wife." After Matthew drops off his shirts, and he like pulls him aside, saying, this is not my wife." And later in the movie, when he goes back trying to go back to him from help, said, "No, she's all right. She better now, much better now." I was like, "Shit, he got Xerox."
Xerox. Does he have that smell?
Yes.
Back in the day.
You're talking about the duplicating fluid?
Yeah, that we used to have to the smell.
Machine.
Yeah, the Ditto machine.
We're
showing our age.
Yes, we are showing our age. Okay, go ahead with your next one.
The only one I have left is that's from Nancy, and it's her saying, "It's a monster. It has hair all over it," and that's referring to Jeff's doppelganger that's in the next room because she was freaking out over it.
I have 3 left. So next one is from Elizabeth. This is when Matthew and her are driving around. This is when they almost hit, McCarthy's character. She says, "I keep seeing all these people all recognizing each other. Something's passing between them all, some secret. It's a conspiracy, and I know it." I was like, okay, then, you just sound crazy. And this is what, like, when Kibner's trying to calm her down and trying to convince her otherwise. So next one is, and when Kibner and Jack find them in the lab, and this is after Kibner and Jack have been Xeroxed, as it were.
Yeah.
And Elizabeth pleads with them and says, "We'll just leave the city." So Kibner tells him, "You don't have to leave the city. Nothing changes. You can have the same clothes, the same car." Elizabeth asks, "What happens to us?" Kibner says, "You'll be born again into an untroubled world, free of anxiety, fear, and hate." Shit.
Yeah, but it was also a cold night that night too, because I saw her very perky. Because it was, I think it was the only nude scene in the movie too. So, and knowing how California is at night, I'm sorry, she must have been freezing.
Yeah. Well, I think it was filmed in like February and March, so it was definitely cold.
Oh yeah.
Well, San Francisco is generally
cold all around. It's
right on
literally
it's
fall. It's fall weather all year round, if you think about it. In my opinion, but I like that kind of weather. But
okay,
I only had like one note, and this is something you and I could discuss. Did you notice that Bennell's windshield was broken?
Yeah,
all the time. There had this whole. How did he not get pulled over for a broken windshield at that time?
Yeah, I don't know. But, but even because he got his windshield broken by the guys at the restaurant that, when he found the rat dropping in the soup.
Yeah, I know. They purposely did it. It looked like a gunshot, though, the way, if you look, there's one big hole and it's a big, spider crack.
Well, they probably threw a full wine bottle at him, so that's at least a couple pounds right there.
That is, but you would think the cops would pull him over in a heartbeat. Jeez.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, next quote I have is, after Matthew and Elizabeth are injected with a sedative, and this is after Kibner's Xeroxing, they injecting him with a sedative, and she says, "I hate you," and David replies, "We don't hate you. There's no need for hate now or love." And this is when Elizabeth and Matthew kind of profess their love to each other. She says, "I love you, Matthew," and they both say, "People will stop you." Says, "In an hour," and David replies, "In an hour, you won't want them to. Don't be trapped by old concepts. Matthew, you're evolving into a new life form. We came here from a dying world. We drift through the universe from planet to planet, pushed on by the solar winds. We adapt and we survive. The function of life is survival," which is scary and Borgish in a way. So.
Scary, Borgish, and very much almost like the thing itself.
Yes. And he said, the thing is, microscopic. These are just little pollen grains and very, very smart, in a sense, very, very smart plants.
That is true.
Okay. And my final one is Matthew, and turn around and hear the screech and you hear scream. No, no. I can't replicate her scream. No. There's no way I'm going to do that. So.
No, we'll plug that in.
Yes. Oh, that's got to be the sounder. That's got to be the sounder at the beginning, please.
I'll make that work.
All right. Okay, so let's move on to the ratings. Mark, what are your ratings of this film?
For a remake of a classic 56 film and it being the 70s and understandably based upon its time it was filmed, but the overall story aspect of it, the acting and everything, I give this 9 out of 10.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for me, for a lot of the same reasons, I give it a 9.5 because I think it's just a damn good movie, and it does have a lot of just a creepy environmental element to it, and it's just, and you just feel kind of like, if you don't know what the heck's going on just yet, you feel a little bit of a tingle. It's like, what the hell is going on here?
This is one of those great date movies that you go for a first date with a girl, and she doesn't know your movie taste whatsoever, and she's never even heard of the movie. If she kind of gets it, then she's a keeper. If not, she freaks out and runs out of your apartment or house. Sorry, fella, it wasn't meant to be. That's my thought. I think that would be great. It would be a good tester movie for somebody. But that's who I am. I'm strange like that.
Yeah. I'll tell you offline about another one. Okay, and with that, we got to go to our less popular or guilty pleasure movies, as we sometimes call it. And those are any movies that are just not popular or great, but you just have to watch them every once in a while because you just love to watch them. So, Mark, which movie is yours?
Well, something I gravitated to again recently, I don't know, is me longing to be back in a metal band again. And I miss my old friends, but my buddy Brandon from the band I was in called Imperil put out a music video, and it made me think, and I'm like, oh, I gotta watch this again, even though it's the second time this week. The movie Rockstar with Mark Wahlberg and Jennifer Aniston from 2001. It's a kind of a dramedy. And think about back in the day when Rob Halford left Judas Priest or Steve Perry left Journey, and they replaced them. But it has its comical points within the movie itself. It's all heavy metal and rock and everything else. Got Jason Bonham in it, as well as I'm forgetting Jeff Pilson, definitely from Dokken, is playing bass in the main band, as well as Zach Wilde from Ozzy's band. But to me, I always enjoyed it. It was one of those movies that came and went in 2001. But it's something that I just hold dear and I just love to watch because, it's metal. And I used to have long hair and play bass in a metal band.
Nice. Yeah, I don't remember watching that one, so I might have to give it a look-see. Okay, and for mine, from 1972, Beware the Blob.
Oh, the sequel of The Blob, actually.
Yes, because it involves a frozen specimen of the original blob that was taken to the North Pole being brought back.
Yes.
Really good. So,
yeah.
And and one of the the description, I wrote down the description of the movie. Since when the technician's wife accidentally defrosts it, it terrorized the populace, including local hippies, bowlers, and kittens. And I was like, and I was more upset by terrorizing kittens. Yeah, because it absorbed a kitten. It was like one of the very first things it absorbed, and I was like, that's mean.
It is mean. So just take a little child. It's okay.
Not even that. But but the thing is, and this is kind of like a comedy slash.
Yeah, it was
alleged horror.
It was a sequel to the original with Steve McQueen that we had back in the day. And I do appreciate it for the fact that I did enjoy it just the same. I don't think it was filmed in the same area in Pennsylvania as the original.
I don't know.
But our friend Jamie and I lives in Pennsylvania, and we always look forward to going to Blobfest. We keep talking about it, never do it. Same thing with Crystal Lake at Camp Novi Bosco. We were going to go revisit the original Friday the 13th filming location there. But when they do Blobfest, they have everybody running out from the original movie, running out of the movie theater. And then you get a picture of you running out of the movie theater, and they have like a CG kind of blob coming out of the theater itself, coming after you as a picture you could take home during Blobfest. But they have a whole bunch of things. But I always thought that sequel, Beware the Blob, is it was more of a comedic edge to the original. And you would think by the time of the 70s, something that came out in the 50s, that's a sequel, it's going to be a little bit comedic. Look at what we got in the 70s. We got Squirm. with the worms. And then we got Stuff. Beware the Stuff. If you remember that.
I remember the stuff.
Yeah. So it to me, it works. And it's one of those things that I do attribute to. I would watch that on occasion as well.
Yeah, I got but I got a couple things about the movie that are kind of interesting.
Okay.
Is that one, it has Dick Van Patten in it.
Ooh.
Because I remember him. The second one is I don't remember. I might have heard this once, but I didn't remember that the actor Larry Hagman directed this one.
Larry Hagman?
Yes. And who also
Dream of Genies, Larry Hagman?
The very same. And he also has a cameo in it where they put in put some jelly red jelly in front of a light, and it shows him being absorbed in it.
Did anybody shoot him like JR?
No.
Oh, man.
Okay, but and here's the best part, and I can hear Daphne's eyes rolling right now.
Of course.
Is that the writer of this was Richard Clare, who's this movie was based on his story, A Chip Off the Old Blob.
I
love it.
Oh, it is a chip because it was frozen. They had to nuke it a little bit to make it alive again.
You just have to unfreeze it. There's no killing it, so far as I can tell.
Yeah.
Other than just immobilizing it.
Yeah. It's a song.
Alrighty. Okay, so that does it for our show. So do we have any audio feedback?
We have no audio feedback, but we do have feedback from a previous episode of Adrenaline Cinema Podcast, so we could talk about that. The next two we got were for Ocean's 11 that Ben and I had covered. So if those of you listened to our Ocean's 11 2001 coverage that Ben Beck and I did, Ben from Wilhelm and I did here, these are the people that sent out some feedback. No audio feedback, but just written on Facebook. Our friend Damien, who is from Watched It in the 80s, states, such a great movie. You think we need one more? You think we need more? All right, we'll get one more. Quoting one of the characters.
And that's talking about how many people they need for the job?
Yeah.
Was that in regards to? Okay.
Yeah.
Because it's been a while since I've seen Oceans.
Yeah, that was Danny and Rusty talking. Next up would be Kelly and her same thoughts on Ocean's 11, saying, this is my favorite movie that takes place in Vegas. Nothing gets me more in a Vegas mood than watching those guys steal from the big casinos, which is very true because we can never win it ourselves. I do agree.
Oh, I take that back. I have won a bit.
You can win a little bit. Yeah, it depends on how you gamble.
Well, does 4,000 count?
That counts a lot.
But that was years ago though. That's because I just don't play enough. So
yeah, it was beginner's luck, and you were like, I'm not tempting that again.
Well, no, it wasn't beginner's luck. I knew how to play. I have training software for a couple of the games.
You might.
It just shows you how to play optimally. So that's all it does.
So basically, everybody find Jerry when you go to Vegas, get him and help you out.
Exactly.
I'm sure Ben will be like, hey, you're my friend. Let's go.
Exactly.
All right. So we're at the point in the podcast where can listeners hear you or any podcast recommendations?
Well, I've been on several episodes of Watched It in the 80s, and the last one we did kind of escapes me at the moment. I think that was, we did Poltergeist was the last one we did. So that was for Halloween. And we did several others like, Outland and Das Boot. And and then other episodes of Adrenaline, as you can, for regular listeners will well know my presence here.
Yeah, exactly. As you all know, Jerry is a regular, and he's there for more of the nostalgic stuff that we cover here on this podcast. We like to do all the 70s stuff, like the Ape series, and definitely the Harryhausen stuff that's out there too. So keep in mind when you listen to this, because it's not every episode, but it's every other episode. So I like to mix it up, and we have fun with it.
Yeah, we do.
As far as where people could hear me, well, you could also hear me on Panels to Pixels podcast. As a lot of you guys already know, and we took a break. Steve's been out for a while. Rob and I have been filling in here and there for the holiday special editions for both Halloween and for Christmas. Rob and I will be finishing up and finalizing everything for Umbrella Academy before Steve comes back. And then I'm going to move right into Peacemaker. I'm going to do an overall coverage of season 1 of Peacemaker and then whatever comes after that. Before you get the Umbrella Academy follow-ups or remaining of for that particular season 3 wrap-up review, you will have one episode of me interviewing the one and only Marilyn Gigliotti, who played Veronica in Clerks in 1994 and Clerks 3 from 2022. So just check that out if you like. Marilyn's been great, and please do support her and her work. She has her website. Everything's in the doc notes for Panels to Pixels podcast for that particular episode. So check that out and check out the YouTube because there's video of me and her talking. So you could actually see me. So there's that. You could also have heard me on Podcast Network. Right now, the podcast is over, but Sandman Cast with our friend Jamie. So Jamie Dimmick and I covered Sandman Cast on Podcastica, and I was on for the holiday edition too, Star Wars holiday edition, I should say, for Podcastica. So you could check me out there. As far as everything else, just keep apprised of what's going on here, and as far as Panels to Pixels podcast is concerned. As you heard before, we had some feedback, and yes, they were from our friends, but who cares? that was through our Facebook page. So, for the most part, as you could tell from our friends, you could actually send feedback through our Facebook page, which would be facebook.com/Adrenaline Cinema Podcast. You'll see an image of what we're going to be covering. All you have to do is leave your feedback below in the comments. We'll read them, just like I did. If you don't feel like doing that, you just send us an email. All you have to do is write a written out email to adrenalincinemapodcast@gmail.com, and there we'll read it. Or if you don't feel like writing something out and having us read it and you want your voice to be heard, all you have to do is record your voice, send it as an attachment. We'll plug it in as we're recording a podcast and we'll comment on it. We'll probably be agreeing with you a lot. But please send that in if you can. If there is any rating or review for any of the podcast players' choices that you use to listen to us on, please do so. Give us one. Be appreciated. Usually the best ones are Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. I think Spotify is another one that offers it as well. So if you could give us a rating or review, please do so. And of course, the best way to get the word spread is word of mouth. So if you like what we're doing and you have a conversation with somebody and you mention about the podcast or a movie that we were talking about, just mention us and say, hey, you could listen to them here. So yeah, that's about it. You could hear us on any podcast player choice. I'm not going through all 30 of them. It's ridiculous. It's crazy. It'd be ludicrous, like ludicrous speed.
Only without the plaid.
If I gone to plaid, I'm going back to Seattle. All right. Well, I think that covers everything we had on our podcast, huh, Jerry? All right. Well, what is next on the list for us to do that we could actually give people a little bit of awareness what you and I are covering, or maybe a third person that will be coming on with us?
Yeah. We are coming up. We are covering from the 1980s, Big Trouble in Little China.
Yes, John Carpenter
with our friend Jamie. Yeah, and with our friend Jamie will be joining us for that.
Jamie Dimmick will be back, and oddly enough, Jerry, you'll laugh. She has not watched this movie ever.
That's bonkers. Why? Why? This is right up our alley.
Oh, well, come on. She loved They Live, and she and I covered that. So I said, "Hey, dip your toes into this one. Get your boyfriend Tony, get together, watch it one night, take some notes, watch it again for fun too, because there's a lot of zingers from Kurt Russell in that particular movie. And if you listeners have never saw the movie, please, I recommend it. If you like kung fu Chinese films that are out there, yes, this was done in the mid 80s, but it's got Kurt Russell. What's her name from Sex and the City? Kim Cattrall is in it. Yeah. And so much more. And, the imagery in itself for its time was pretty cool. And the idea of the jujitsu or the kung fu fighting that's going on. Everybody's gone kung fu fighting, I guess, in this movie. But check it out and have fun, and check in with us when we do that, right?
Yes. Yeah, and it's, to just put it in one simple phrase, it's over the top.
So if you like really bad puns, yes, this is the movie for you. All right. Well, that was our coverage for Invasion of the Body Snatchers from 1978 for Adrenaline Cinema. I'm Mark.
And I'm Jerry.
We'll talk to you guys later.